Hey guys, so this is actually my first video filming since my OneD&D playtest review videos kind of took off. I really wasn't kidding when in my Marshall's review, when I said I had my content planned out for the next 5 weeks. I really thought I was going to schedule all these videos and then just go and enjoy my vacation. And I wanted to start this with a little bit of a ramble, so if you want to skip to the content, head to this timestamp. But I wanted to open up with a message just because, this, for the first time since I started making videos, which was before the channel actually started, so, about 9 months ago, I really didn't think very many people would watch them. And I was originally trying to create these videos that were more oriented at new players who were really intimidated by just the number of options in D&D. Maybe they're coming to the game from the new Honor Among Thieves movie or from the new Vox Machina show. I wanted to create a resource for them to play the kind of archetypes they might have come into the game thinking about, but just set up in the rules with some level of basic optimization so that they had options available to them and weren't making any major mistakes. But the kind of people that are coming from the OneD&D playtest videos are very different from the kind of beginners that I originally oriented the channel at. Whereas the channel was kind of originally oriented more at these newer players who maybe got talked into D&D by a friend and were coming with a very, very loose sense of the rules. The OneD&D people are much more old veteran players, people who are used to D&D 5e, but are curious about what is the future of this game going to look like, and what is the, what do I need to be ready for when OneD&D comes out? And that's a very different type of audience, a very different type of videos. These build videos really are my passion and the original inspiration for the channel and something that motivates me, so I'm going to continue to do those. But hopefully I'll create more videos like this where we analyze some of the OneD&D stuff, and certainly I can imagine redoing my builds as OneD&D builds in the future. So I just wanted to let everybody know I will be continuing to make videos for both of these audiences, and I hope when a video comes out that doesn't really seem to be oriented at you, you'll stay subscribed and continue to watch out for more videos on the channel as I try to keep everybody happy. So by far the most contentious topic in the OneD&D playtest recently has been the Warlock changes. I've seen a lot of homebrew fixes for them online. There have been all kinds of different solutions proposed, and some of them are pretty out there. So I thought maybe I'd collect together some of my favorites and we can see what you guys think. And I think what I'm going to limit myself to is, it does seem like they're getting away from short rests, so I'm not going to include any changes that include reverting back to short rests specifically. It also seems like they're probably going for a little bit more homogeneity among spellcasters, so the most we could get is a similar system to the old Pact Magic where we have a different number of slots, but no changing to the spell point system or anything like that. So firstly, I do think it is possible that Wizards of the Coast will just call an audible and revert Warlocks back to their old Pact Magic state. Certainly given the amount of backlash online, that is completely possible. So all of our suggestions are going to be a little bit more creative than that. We're going to try and generate some new ideas, kind of bring Warlock into the new OneD&D environment. Each of the changes individually, I think, is a pretty good change for the Warlock. None of them are meant to individually be the panacea that cures this class of its identity crisis right now. So you can combine them, you can mix and match. Some of them are obviously going to be mutually exclusive, but I do think that looking at this as a menu of changes might be very helpful. It wouldn't make sense to get two main courses, but certainly you can interchange some desserts. So what makes a Warlock a Warlock? I think that is a question we're going to have to answer here in order to make these changes feel right for the class. And it's a difficult one. There's a lot of wrong answers. The Warlock is not a melee fighter or a spellcaster. It can be both. The Warlock is not a cunning deceiver or a tactician. It can be both. The Warlock is not an accomplished summoner or a very resilient caster. It can be both. A Warlock is someone who makes a deal with an entity of great power. They are deal makers. They are willing to sacrifice for power, and there's a sense with the Warlock that they use their powers in a myriad of ways, right? That they are power hungry to a fault. The way Pact Magic made that fantasy come alive was to realize the fantasy of a caster who was on the budget, right? They had 2 spell slots, but those spell slots were of the highest level. So when they did cast a spell, you paid attention. This is because they were tapping into like dark and terrible forces beyond the ability of those who study and pray for magic. All right, so numbered list. Number 5. Pack magic. There's nothing about the short rest mechanic that was important for that fantasy. If the main issue at tables is that they run vastly different numbers of short rests, you could simply reintroduce a number of high-level spell slots without the lower-level spell slots that restore on a long rest. One option is to have them renew a certain number of times per day, perhaps in like a 10-minute ritual. I've seen this a lot online. It seems to be a very popular solution for the Warlock, but I really think it goes for the letter of the law rather than the spirit on removing short rests. Doing this would keep kind of all the problematic elements of needing to pause for a short rest, while removing the standardized language that kind of unifies classes across the game. I want to emphasize this because I see it a lot online. The issue that Wizards is facing is not that tables are using fewer short rests. It's that they use different numbers of short rests, a wide variety. Some use 10 short rests per long rest, some use 4, some use 2, most use 0. So the Warlock needs to be viable at all of these tables, which means just removing the kind of recharge component from the mix. If we're just going to stick with recharging on a long rest, how do we do that? Well, obviously to balance this, you're going to need more than 2 slots, but maybe not too many more, because you have your boons working for you the rest of the time. A lot of Warlock archetypes are either using Pact of the Blade for consistent melee attacks, or cantrips like Eldritch Blast for consistent cantrip damage. So, and you've got your invocations that are going to let you cast a spell, at will throughout the day. I think maybe let's go proficiency bonus number of spell slots at the highest level, restoring on a long rest. Levels going up to 5 as usual, and then they've got the Mystic Arcanums available to get additional spells. This makes Warlock unique, it eliminates short rests, and it ties into their strength for the kind of existing metrics that allow for all that diversity in the class. 4. Pact of the Chain needs an improvement. So I think Pact of the Chain comes out as kind of the loser in this UA. The stat block does not represent potent combat potential. Even with their invocation of the Chainmaster, it's just not measuring up to the other two. One would conclude then in combat that this pact is basically relying on cantrips for most of their damage, or maybe even low-level spell slots, which is just the same as Pact of the Tome, but worse. Plus, the familiar dealing its damage is costing you a reaction every round. Weirdly, the investment of the Chainmaster does give you some really cool combat utility. So as a control mastermind Warlock, this seems very fun. But it needs a bump. My proposal is to bump the damage to proficiency bonus plus half Warlock level. This is a minor bump to damage. It scales to 15 by the end of your career, but it starts out in the same exact spot. So it's kind of getting a greater linear increase. I think it also needs extra attack built into the familiar at level 5. You could just do this the same way they did the multi-attack with Pact of the Blade. Just say at 5th level, this gains multi-attack. The health is also really low. If this is going to be your combat advantage, if this is like what you are bringing to the party, you need it to survive a couple of rounds. I would say make it 2 times your Warlock level, or maybe even higher. You could get an invocation for Chain Warlocks that makes their health equal to 5 times your Warlock level to have a really tanky Pact Familiar. This may seem crazy, but at level 10, that's still only 50 HP, costing you an invocation. That's probably just about half your health points as the Warlock. If this invocation was available to like 9th or higher level Warlocks, it could represent like a real compensation for some of these kind of weaker features. Another option here is to have Pact of the Chain be like the Summoner archetype. Perhaps an invocation lets you summon more familiars, 2 or 3 copies of your Warlock familiar. Or you could just add to the familiar stat block a little ability that says, other creatures created or summoned by your spell effects, while this familiar is alive, gain max health equal to this familiar's max health, making you the king of summoning otherworldly beings, and that's how this pact feels distinct. Number 3, invocation changes. So this is a quick one. A lot of the old invocations are absorbed into the base class. So Pact of the Blade got that multi-attack, Pact of the Chain got a Voice of the Chainmaster automatically, and then this new invocation, Mystic Arcanum, gives you a very powerful option to grab a higher level spell to cast once a day. And then it's really a mixed bag. A lot of old favorites are here, the Devil's Sight and Agonizing Blast. And so are the invocations to cast spells at will, but it's usually the non-offensive or kind of unused spells. Some other invocations that can really compete with Mystic Arcanum are needed here, I think. That would make this feel like a more honest selection palette. One option might be to bundle some of these spell invocations the way that some racial abilities work. So imagine if Master of Myriad Forms said, when you take this invocation, you can cast Disguise Self without expending a spell slot. At 9th level, you may cast Alter Self without expending a spell slot. All of a sudden, it's got like these two spells wrapped into one. Building these thematically similar spells together to make fewer and more impactful invocations might be a good way to offer more packages to Warlocks than just spending the invocation tax on Mystic Arcanum. Speaking of, number 2, Mystic Arcanum changes. Change 1. I feel like you should make this a spell slot. Allowing for lower level spells like Armor of Agathis to upcast into this higher level slot that you've grabbed seems appropriate. It can't possibly be a balance issue because you're allowing for that higher level spell to be cast. This just gives you that flexibility to use it in more creative ways, which feels very Warlock to me. Change number 2, I do think this should be returned to the base class. This is also a popular comment I've seen online that I completely agree with. Right now, Mystic Arcanum is arguably the best choice for an invocation at essentially every level. So you might want 1 or 2 invocations to support your specific playstyle, but the rest you're going to spend on Mystic Arcanum. This is an illusion of choice. If the invocations were dropped to like 4 invocations, like spread out over the level period, and the Mystic Arcanum was automatically added to each other level, that would feel a lot more honest. Change number 3, make it cost. As a core feature of the Warlock class, it would feel really cool if this was the site of that exchange for great power. Although you could flavor this in a lot of ways, perhaps a beneficent patron would just say, this is what's needed in order to transfer my power to you. Maybe the Mystic Arcanum gives you some penalty when you use it. If they use the new exhaustion system, the 10 levels of exhaustion, maybe using your Mystic Arcanum gives you 1 level of exhaustion. Or maybe it costs health equal to 5 times the spell's level. Maybe it gives you just the stunned condition until the start of your next turn, making you vulnerable. And then I think change number 4, level it up. If part of the fantasy of the Warlock is being given great power, almost greater than they can responsibly handle, let's make that the identity of the class. Increase the cap of Mystic Arcanum by 1, removing the last entry. Now Warlocks can take a 3rd level spell at 3rd level, a 4th level spell at 5th level, a 5th level spell at 7th level. They can cast it once per day, and doing so costs them, but they are capable of these like great and terrible workings of magic beyond what anyone else in the party is currently capable of. I want to take this concept of equal exchange even further with my number 1 change, trade-offs. If the wizard and the sorcerer get a bunch of new spells special to them, I think the warlock should have some spells that feel warlocky. Have spells that invoke a trade-off. Maybe they make you give up one of your heroic advantages in order to cast Bane on an enemy concentration free, or that apply vulnerability to a damage type to you while you deal damage to an enemy. I think pulling some of the mechanical complexity of the Blood Hunter here wouldn't be a bad idea. The mutagens that give you a big advantage in exchange for kind of a noticeable downside, I think are a perfect model for this kind of equal exchange caster. I think more treats should have something like this, which really plays into the customization of the class. You can take stuff that make you the best at whatever role you're trying to go for, but they're going to close off other options with these downsides. Imagine an otherworldly protection that acts like a shield of faith on yourself, but it lowers the AC of allies near you by 1. Or an invocation that lets you cast Eldritch Blast with your bonus action, so that it frees up your action, but it consumes a first level spell slot to do that. Trade-offs could be a really fun way to boost the power of spells or invocations while maintaining this very strong sense of flavor for the Warlock class. I don't know if this is best housed in invocations or in class-specific spells, but I would love to see something like these trade-offs incorporated. Alright guys, let me know what you thought of the video, what you think of these changes, or if you have others you'd like to see instead. I hope that you continue to subscribe to the channel if you like the content and you want to see more, and I will be back again next week.